If you're watching this, you're probably thinking about trying a weight loss medication. Maybe you've looked at options like Zepbound or Wegovy. Maybe you've already realized that your insurance, like mine, does not cover weight loss medications. And now you're trying to look into other options like compounded versions, and you're trying to find out what might actually work for your real life, your budget, and your long-term goals. In this video, I'm not here to tell you what to do or try to sell you anything. I'm going to share what I've learned from my own experience using compounded tirzepatide since August of 2023 and losing 125 pounds on it. I want to share how I've navigated primary care, telehealth providers, and compounding pharmacies to get the very best health care I could for myself and completely change my life. If you're new here, I'm Megan. I started in August 2023, weighing 243 pounds. I lost 100 pounds in 10 months and continued to lose an additional 25 pounds over the next 5 months. I have been maintaining my weight right around 118 pounds for over a year now with a weekly shot. I am not a doctor or any kind of medical professional. I am a homeschool mom of 3, and I just want to share with others the amazing life-changing magic that these medications have had on my life. My life has been a complete 180 since I started on tirzepatide, and the profound joy that I wake up with every single day is something that I wish for all of us to have. What I hope to share in this video is perspective, some context, and some of the things I wish I understood earlier in this process. So let's get into it. Now, most people don't turn to compounded medications as a very first step. They turn to it because of cost. Weight loss medications are expensive, and insurance plans often don't cover these amazing weight loss medications. My insurance doesn't. So if you are somebody without diabetes or without sleep apnea or a way to get these medications covered by your insurance, you are faced with a choice to either pay over $1,000 a month for this medication or figure out a less expensive option. Would I prefer to take name brand Zepbound? Yeah, of course I would, but it's just not an option for me and my wallet, so I have had to turn to other options. When I started taking tirzepatide, there were basically only 2 options. You either paid out of pocket for the name brand Zepbound, or you found a provider who would prescribe a compounded version and get it from a compounding pharmacy for a fraction of the price. These days we have a lot more options, and I'm going to share more about those options later in this video, so make sure to stick around so that you can have all the information so that you can make the choice that fits best for you. Before we go any further, let's get into what compounded medications are. I know for me, I had experience using a compounded pharmacy because one of my kids had eczema, and we sought out a provider who was overseas, and they prescribed a medication for my child that was not something that you could get off the shelf. It was not a name brand medication that was out there. It was kind of a custom mix of 3 different medications that this doctor found worked really well. So we had to go to a compounding pharmacy. They took these 3 distinct ingredients, they mixed them together into one medication that we could use, and it cleared up my daughter's eczema. The compounding pharmacy that I went to pick up that medication was 10 minutes away. I walked into the store. It looked like any other pharmacy that I had ever gone to. It had things on the shelves. They were dispensing medication just like I was used to. It didn't seem like a far stretch to be getting this medication from this compounding pharmacy, and I never once had any concerns about the safety of the medication that I was receiving. I just trusted this is a pharmacy. I'm getting a medication from a pharmacy and I'm going to give it to my child. And I believed it was going to be just fine. And it was, in fact, just fine. With the boom that we have experienced over the past few years with compounded GLP-1 and weight loss medications, we are seeing a lot more of these compounding pharmacies pop up. And they're not the mom and pop kind of compounding pharmacies that I went to get my daughter's medication. These compounding pharmacies are big business. Now, compounded GLP-1 medications like tirzepatide are legal, and a lot of times they start out being legal because there are shortages. When the pharmaceutical companies could not produce enough of the medication to keep up with the demand, regulations were passed that allowed compounding pharmacies to help decrease that shortage. They were able to sell these medications to patients who had prescriptions for them, but otherwise were not able to get them. They continue to be legal today, and I am not a lawyer and I don't pretend to to understand all of the intricacies around compounding pharmacies. But the important thing to know is that these compounding pharmacies are not regulated at a national level. They are regulated at the state level, and every state will have regulations that are just a little bit different for their compounding pharmacies. So the finished product that you're getting from a compounding pharmacy, while it may be perfectly safe, it is not regulated by the FDA in the same way that another prescription name brand medication that you go pick up at your Walgreens or your CVS is. When I look at the safety of compounded medications, I think it kind of breaks down into two areas that we have to be concerned about: the ethics of the provider who is prescribing the medication for you, and the quality of the compounding pharmacy. Compounds can be perfectly safe. I have taken one for over 2 years without a single issue related to the compounded nature of my medications. But I do think that it requires more responsibility and involvement than picking up a name brand medication at a mainstream pharmacy. Another thing to clear up is that compounded medications are not the same thing as generic medications. Pharmaceutical companies are pouring tons of money into the research and trial phase of their medications, and they're granted a period of time where they are allowed use of this medication under the name brand where nobody else can make copies of this medication. Once that time period has run out, then companies are able to come and offer a generic version of this medication. Compounds are not quite the same thing. Generic medications are FDA approved, chemically identical to the name brand, and manufactured at scale under federal regulations. Compounded medications, however, are custom prepared medications made by a compounding pharmacy and regulated at the state level. The active ingredient in these GLP-1 compounded versions of the medication is the same as the active ingredient in the name brand medications, but oftentimes with a compounding pharmacy, because they are trying to make a custom mix of these medications, because that is how they're offering it to the general public, they mix this active ingredient with something else. Different pharmacies mix it with different things. Often it is something like a B vitamin that's going to give you a little energy boost. I have taken compounded tirzepatide prepared by 6 different pharmacies, and they have been mixed with various other fillers, and I've never noticed a difference between any of my compounded medications. As you research other options for more affordable weight loss medications and GLP-1s, you might start to see some other things out there. Right now, there is one name brand pill that is FDA approved for weight loss, but you will see all sorts of options out there like compounded tirzepatide drops or tablets or sublingual options. And as far as I know, as of right now, none of those other options are legitimate. If you are seeing other cheaper, more affordable options that are not an injection, these are probably gimmicks, probably have no data to show their effectiveness. And to be honest, you really would have no idea what it is that you are getting. I would be very skeptical and steer clear of those kinds of options. So let's get into the differences between a compounded version of a GLP-1 and the name brand options. There are some key differences that I think make one better than the other, and that doesn't mean that both options aren't viable options, but I think you have to go into it knowing these differences so that you can be prepared to manage them as you're taking these medications. Name brand options come in an auto-injector pen. These have doses that are pre-measured and pre-filled. You are not having to pull up your dose with a syringe and a vial, and it's really foolproof. These pens are really genius and made for anybody to be able to use them, whether you have any kind of medical background or whether you know how to really dig in and read instructions. In general, you can feel pretty good about using these auto-injector pens. Contrast that with compounded medications, and really, this is the wild, wild west of medication. You are sent a vial of medication, some syringes, and instructions on how much to give yourself. You as the patient are fully responsible for determining your correct dose, pulling it up correctly in the syringe, making sure that you're following guidelines so that you're not spreading germs or contaminating vials or contaminating your needle. And all the little numbers on a vial honestly can be confusing. You have milliliters and milligrams and units. And for a lot of us, math is hard, me included. And let's be honest, hard math and medicine plus mistakes is not a good combination. Using compounded medications introduces a lot more chances for error and is inherently less forgiving than using the name brand auto-injector pens. Another common concern that I know I share with a lot of people is a fear of needles. I have a true needle phobia. I am really, really scared of needles. I have to do deep breathing and meditation prior to every single shot that I do. I also have never given myself my own shot because of this fear. My husband has given me all of my shots for over 2 years now. The good news is that the needle is really, really tiny. For compounded GLP-1 medications, you use an insulin syringe. The needle is this big and it's super, super thin, and it does not hurt. Even though I'm scared of needles, I can say that with 100% honesty that it just really doesn't hurt. It's just the idea of the needles that gets me worked up and gets me scared. But I do think with something like the auto-injector pen, maybe after 2 years, I would be able to give myself a shot. Whereas with the compounded version and using needles and syringes, I just am not there yet. Okay, so let's talk about getting started with compounded medications. So what I did was I called my primary care provider and I told them I was interested in weight loss medications. They referred me to a local telehealth provider who they were working with who was prescribing compounded medications. My insurance does not cover any weight loss medications. And by the time I started on this journey, the glorious $25 coupon that many people had used to get these prescriptions at $25 a month, even without insurance coverage, was already gone. So my options were to pay the $1,200 a month for Mounjaro because Zepbound wasn't a thing yet. Back then it was Mounjaro. So I called this local telehealth provider and I was able to set up an appointment right away. It was a phone call. The provider I went through was kind of a med spa. In addition to weight loss shots, they were offering things like Botox and skin treatments and things like that. So I had my screening call and it felt just like a regular doctor appointment. They asked me all sorts of questions about my height, my health history. I had to fill out forms so that they could make sure I was in good health. They told me about the different options. I decided to go with tirzepatide because it worked the best. And I figured if I was going to be spending money on this, I wanted to give myself the very best chance at success that I could. At the time, I had no idea how much success I could have. I was weighing 243 pounds, and honestly, I just wanted to be under 200 pounds. I thought if I could get under 200 pounds, that would give me my life back. I would be able to move a little bit better, and I would be feeling more like myself. So I didn't go into this with a goal of losing 100 plus pounds. That is just what ultimately happened. During my appointment, my provider was really upfront and honest about how different people responded to the medication, the possible side effects that I could have, and helped walk me through some of the best practices and tips that I should follow for maximum success on this medication. I had recent blood work from an appointment with my primary care doctor, and I was able to provide that to my telehealth provider. They were able to look at it, suggested that I get repeat blood work done in about 6 months after being on the medication. And I felt really comfortable getting my medication from this provider. It felt like a traditional doctor experience, like I would have for any other medical ailment that I had out there, except that they knew what I was talking about when I said I wanted to lose weight with a GLP-1 weight loss shot. Since I started almost 2.5 years ago, I have gone through a few other channels to get my medication, and I'm going to share more about using one of the large telehealth companies out there that you might see ads for, and how the experience is a little different than this first experience that I had. So stay tuned, and I'll share more about that later in this video. Before we go on, I wanted to talk about the difference between a telehealth provider and a compounding pharmacy. So telehealth companies are the ones that are providing the prescription for your medication, and the compounding pharmacy is the one that is actually dispensing the medication to you. When you're looking at options for where to get your compounded GLP-1 medications, honestly, the pharmacy probably matters more than the telehealth company, because you want to know how the medication is prepared and have full transparency around sourcing and testing. I said before that I've gotten my medication from 6 different pharmacies. And I just wanted to share a little bit about what I have learned are some best practices and things that I didn't even know I should be concerned about or that I should ask when I first started getting these medications. You should know that telehealth companies generally partner with multiple compounding pharmacies, depending on either where you live in the country or what the supply and demand is and where they can get the medication the fastest. And generally, you don't really have a say in what pharmacy that medication is coming from. So I've only used 3 different providers to prescribe my medication, but I have gotten the medication from 6 different pharmacies. That's because the providers that I used connected me to a different pharmacy at different times to get the medication. So let's talk about some of the things to look for when you're researching the pharmacy where your medication might come from. My very first shipments came from a local compounding pharmacy. This was 2.5 years ago, and things might be different now that more and more people are getting these compounded meds. But at the time, it was actually pretty common for providers to order these medications in bulk, get them delivered to their office, draw up the medication in syringes, and then give the syringes that were pre-filled to patients to inject at home. And like I said, I have no medical background. I am not a doctor, but I don't know. That just seems fishy to me. I would not want to be injecting myself with a needle that I don't know how it was handled. I don't know who was drawing that up. I don't know how to ensure that they put the right amount of medication. I don't know how to ensure they put the medication that was prescribed to me in that vial. There are just a lot of red flags with that, and that would be something that I would not be okay with. You should get your medication from the compounding pharmacy directly, and it should come in a labeled vial with your name on it. It should have the actual dose of the medication on it so that you know what your medication dosage is. Your dosage will be in milligrams. If your provider is giving you something handwritten with just units saying inject 10 units, but you have no idea what the dosage is, that is again another red flag. Your compounding pharmacy should be providing the syringes that you're going to use to pull up the medication from your vial and inject into yourself. These syringes should come in either a bag that is sealed with 10, 12 syringes in it, or the syringes should be individually wrapped so that you know that the syringes that you're getting are completely sterile, unused, new syringes before you go injecting that into your body. Maybe that sounds elementary and basic, but I can't tell you how many times I got just loose syringes from a compounding pharmacy or from my provider. Again, that's just a red flag and something I would not be okay with. Reputable pharmacies will be able to provide a COA for you, a certificate of analysis, and that certificate will show the sourcing and the testing for the active ingredient in your medication. If you ask for this certificate, you'll probably realize that the powdered form of the medication that you are getting in your GLP-1 shots is coming from China. That in itself is not a red flag. That's just where a lot of our pharmaceuticals come from. But with a little Googling, you can make sure that the company that your pharmacy is getting those medications from is a reputable source for this medication. After staying with my first provider for about 8 months, my primary care doctor actually started offering prescriptions to a local compounding pharmacy themselves. So I switched and I started getting my tirzepatide through my primary care doctor. I think starting with your primary care doctor as a first step is really the way to go, probably for everybody, because I was able to get blood work done. I was able to be honest with my provider and let them know, hey, I am going to start these medications. Whether you prescribe them or not, I'm going to be on them, but I would like to have a point of contact who I can talk to about these things. And even though my primary care doctor wasn't initially prescribing my medication, that doesn't mean that they can't monitor things going on in my body, or if I was having side effects that needed additional treatment, that I can't ask them about those things. And if your primary care doctor isn't open to that, I might suggest trying to find a new one. Now, not all primary care doctors are going to be willing to prescribe compounded medications, and that's for a lot of reasons. And I think it's probably just a personal decision that they have to come to. And I think it is probably wise for them to be naturally skeptical of these compounded medications. I know that my sister-in-law, who works at a family practice office as a care provider, used to prescribe compounded meds until there were some changes with the regulations, and the pharmacy that they were using basically asked her to lie and said, if you're going to prescribe these meds, you have to check a box that says this patient needs a custom formula of this medication due to medical reasons or something like that. And she wasn't willing to put her medical license on the line to lie just so that a patient could get a cheaper option of these meds, which is unfortunate, but can you blame her? I think care providers are probably doing the best that they can do. And in my situation, finding one, even if they weren't able to prescribe it, but who was willing to do my blood work and follow me along on this journey was my next best bet. And then at some point, they started to prescribe the compounded medication. So I switched over to them. It was about the same cost. So I figured I might as well do it to get all of my care in one place. What I didn't like about going through my primary care doctor was I was required to go in and have a nurse visit every single time I picked up my medication. And honestly, that just took too much time, and it got kind of frustrating to have to go in every month or every 6 weeks. By this point, I had been on the medication for about a year, and I felt really comfortable. I wasn't having a ton of changes in my weight. I wasn't having new side effects or anything like that. And it just kind of felt like a waste of time. So that's when I made the switch to a large telehealth company. I'm going to share the name of the company that I use, but please do not take this as an endorsement. I make no money from sharing this information, and I'm sharing it just because people ask. And the only reason I went with this company is because they were the cheapest option I could find. By this point in my journey, I had already experienced over 100 pounds of weight loss success, and I wasn't too concerned with getting ongoing care. So I knew that I could pretty much choose any company out there. If they were giving me the medication, that's what I needed. So I chose Brello Health because they offer 3 months of tirzepatide at any dose for $499. That is the best price that I've seen out there that is legitimate. I definitely have seen lower prices, and they usually have some red flags for me. When I signed up for Brello Health, I filled out the form online. I never talked to a care provider. I never had any contact with anybody. I just filled out an online form, and I was able to get my medication in the mail. At this point, I was already in my maintenance journey. There was nowhere on the forms where I could say that I was in maintenance and needing this medication for maintenance. So I basically just put my starting point information on the forms when I filled it out. I filled it out as if I was starting at 243 pounds and was able to get my medication. But that's why it does give me pause to recommend a company like this, because you're not talking to anybody. Nobody actually is invested in your health journey, and you have nobody to turn to. I'm sure if I had a question, there's probably a way that I could send a message to a care provider, but they don't know me. They don't know anything about me. It would just be some random nurse practitioner or PA who is fielding my message at the time. That's not to say that I can't get good care through one of these big telehealth companies, but I think it is a little bit harder than if you went through your primary care doctor or a local med spa where you can meet somebody face to face or have a one-on-one phone call with somebody who understands your situation and where you are in your journey. My primary care doctor and the med spa that I used previously both charged more for higher doses of the medication. And one of the things that I liked about Brello Health and some of the larger telehealth companies is that they charge the same amount for all doses. Once you're up in these higher doses and planning to stay there, especially when you're in maintenance, the cost definitely becomes an issue when you think about staying on these medications for the long term at these higher doses. I've been taking anywhere between a 7.5 milligram and 10 milligram dose for over a year now. So being able to get that at the lowest price possible is important to me. When I signed up to get my prescription through this large telehealth company, I put on there that I was taking 15 milligrams, even though I actually was only taking 10 milligrams. But if I'm paying the same amount for any dose, I want to get my money's worth. And while this seems like a good idea, I do have a word of caution that if you're stockpiling meds, you do need to be concerned with the best used by date, the bud date. And I wasn't really concerned with it because in my house, I kind of look at those expiration dates or sell by dates more as like a guideline. I am really comfortable with using my nose like to smell chicken that's a day past the sell by date and determine whether it's okay to use that chicken or not. If I have sugar that is a month past the expiration date, I'm probably going to use that sugar. Like there are just some things where I just don't feel as concerned with it. Now, when it comes to medication, we're dealing with our bodies and we should absolutely play it safe and go by what they say. But we're spending so much money on this, it's easy to want to drag that out as long as you can. So I had a stockpile of this medication because I was ordering it in a higher dose than I actually needed. And what I started to notice was that the medication was losing efficacy really fast. When the medication was within its bud date, it was working fine, but anything past that bud date, I felt like I was having to use more and more of the medication. I'm not super concerned with the dosage and what I'm taking. It doesn't matter to me whether I take 7.5 milligrams or 10 milligrams or 12 milligrams, but what is concerning is that it was really hard to find any consistency with my dosage. I would take the medication expecting certain results because I've had 2 years of experience doing this, and I would get completely different results. The results each week are wildly inconsistent, that I could have appetite suppression or I could not. I could be getting the munchies and searching the pantry for food and having food noise, but the next week I don't. And it's really hard to manage my life when I'm having to deal with these inconsistent doses. Definitely don't recommend stockpiling meds beyond their bud date because you just don't know if they're going to work or if they're going to work in the way that you need them to. I should have said this disclaimer at the beginning, but really what I'm saying here in this video might be completely outdated in like a month because regulations are constantly changing. These pharmaceutical companies are suing compounding pharmacies left and right. Every other day there's a new lawsuit, there's new drugs coming out. It is a changing landscape and we really don't know what the future is for compounded meds. I feel pretty certain that as long as the price on the name brand medications stays high, that compounding meds are going to remain in the picture. Now, the pharmaceutical companies did come out with a less expensive direct-to-consumer option for those without insurance coverage. They call it their LillyDirect, and you can go get tirzepatide from Eli Lilly in a vial, not in the auto-injector pen. There are some key differences between the direct-to-consumer vials and the vials that you would get through a compounding pharmacy. First of all, the price. They're still expensive. They charge a starter price for the starter vials, and then the higher doses have an increased price. You also have to remain kind of on a subscription, where if you miss reordering, I think it's every 45 days, you won't get that introductory price and you'll get charged a higher price. The vials that you get direct to consumer are also single-use vials. They don't have any preservatives in them. They're meant so that you put your syringe in at one time, pull everything out of it, inject it into yourself, and then be done with it. I think for some of us who have done compounded meds the entire time, we are spoiled by a lot of the flexibility that compounded meds give us. For example, I might be on a certain dose and giving myself a weekly shot of that dose, but then the holidays come around and I want to make sure that I'm not going to gain weight during the holidays. I want to make sure that I'm not tempted by all the holiday treats that are happening at parties and my kids baking. So I might increase my dose just a little bit, or I might take my shot and then realize, hey, this is like really wearing off. I didn't give myself quite enough. And so 5 days later, I might give myself a little bit more. And while I personally love this flexibility that compounded meds give me, I can see why actual care providers and the pharmaceutical companies are concerned by that, because no other medication I can think of really allows you to self-dose and self-manage your dosage like that. It's just not a thing when you're dealing with pharmaceuticals. And it's become such a part of my experience with compounded medications that I don't know how to let that go. So the single-use direct-to-consumer vials are not an option for me. Number one, due to the price, but also due to the lack of flexibility. The last thing I wanted to mention about compounded meds and cheaper options when you're looking at starting a GLP-1 medication is gray market peptides. So I mentioned that compounding pharmacies order the ingredient from China, and they are reconstituting it in liquid and preparing that medication for you. Now, you can go and order that medication direct from China yourself. There are people who will connect you to ordering that medication. That is just something I would not do. If you order something yourself, you have no idea what you're getting unless you are willing to do independent testing on every single batch that you receive. I am putting my trust in a compounding pharmacy that is regulated by the state to ensure that the medication that they're ordering is the real deal. I don't want to take that responsibility on for myself, and it's honestly pretty scary when you think about all of the people who are out there doing that. As we talked about with compounding, there is a lot more room for error when you're just talking about injecting yourself. Now, take that up a notch and say, if you're trying to prepare the medication, you're introducing even more chances for error. And again, that's just not a responsibility I want for myself, and I would not recommend that for anybody. So if you're thinking about getting gray market peptides, I would just say no. Your life is valuable and it's not worth the risk. So while I've had amazing success using compounded tirzepatide, compounded medications aren't for everybody. It's not without its own risks. It's not without chances for error, and they're just not for everyone. Oversight, transparency, and safety have to come first, but we also have to consider the bottom line and the cost of these medications. For me, using a compounding pharmacy to get my medication is a middle ground. It's what I needed to get the medication in a way that was affordable for me to sustain in the long term. Compounded tirzepatide changed my life in ways that I could not even imagine before. I am so hopeful for every single person who is watching this video and thinking about starting a GLP-1 medication, because I know what's out there for you when you get started on this journey, because I've been there. I know the success that you can have with these medications, the way that these medications change our brains to make weight loss almost effortless is just an amazing thing that I want all of us to have. I sincerely hope that these pharmaceutical companies start realizing that more and more people want to take these medications, and they need to lower their prices so that it can become accessible to more people. I think if they lower their prices, more and more of us will move over to use the name brand medications. But until that happens, compounding's here to stay, and I am here to stay with compounding. If this video was helpful, I hope you'll take a minute to like the video. Leave me a comment and let me know kind of where you are on your journey and what concerns you might still have about compounding. And make sure to subscribe to my channel for more videos to help motivate you on this journey to a new life.